Welcome back to Live With, brought to you by Species Nutrition. Visit speciesnutrition.com. I'm Dave Palumbo, and today's guest is a great one. I've been watching his channel, binge watching his channel, and very rarely do I do that because I have limited time. It's called Valuetainment. He is an entrepreneur. He was in the military. And guess what? He calls himself a bodybuilder. He probably knows bodybuilding better than I do. It's really my honor to get him here today. Patrick Bet-David, welcome to the show.
Good to have me on, man. Appreciate you for having me.
I got to tell you, I really love the channel and what you're doing with it and the guests you have on there. You know, there's so much to talk about, but how did you get the idea for the channel, and how have you gotten such a great complement of guests to come on the show?
Yeah, so that's a good question. You know, a long time ago, the channel was called Patrick Bet-David, and then one day I just decided to change the name, and I changed it up from Patrick Bet-David to Valuetainment because I said, look, we bring value, we're entertaining, it's becoming a movement, let's call it Valuetainment. And then when we called it Valuetainment, you know, one of those ideas where you think you came up with it and it's a brilliant idea?
Yeah.
So I said, I bet no one's ever come up with this name Valuetainment. We went online. We saw it was a publicly traded company out of Germany.
Oh my God!
And so I contacted the CEO. I said, "I'd like to buy your domain." He says, "I'm on the stock market. What do you want me to do?" so he said, $500,000. I'll sell the domain. I said, "I'm not going to pay that much money."
Right.
4 years later, he sold the domain for $27,000. We bought it, and the channel grew into what it is today. So it's been a wild ride.
So I always wonder when people, buy things that are, $27,000 is a lot of money. Now, I know you make good money, but you obviously found that there was something special about that name. I mean, what resonated with you with that name?
Yeah, so, I think the biggest aspect of that name that drove me is we sat down and we had that conversation about value. One of the ways I've learned over the years, I run an insurance company. I started off with Morgan Stanley Dean Witter a day before 9/11, and I went to Trans, and then I started our own agency October 2009 with 66 insurance agents. We got over 12,000 agents nationwide.
Unbelievable.
And one of the things I learned, Dave, over the years is people are willing to learn the moment you can entertain them. The moment you entertain them and they laugh a little bit, they're more receptive to the ideas.
Right.
Sometimes the more serious you are, they just kind of tune out and go to a different place. So if you can find a way to entertain them,
sure,
they're willing to receive your ideas, and that's what we named it Valuetainment.
I love it. I think it's a tremendous channel. Now you came over from Iran. I mean, you were living there since you were 10 years old, and then you emigrated over here. I have to imagine that was a rough period that you were over there.
It was. We lived in Iran 10 years. And Khomeini died, I think, June 3rd, 89. 6 weeks later, we escaped, went to Germany. We sought asylum, lived at a refugee camp for a couple of years. And then from there, we left and we came to the States on a green card. And then June of 99, I got out of the Army 2 months early and became a U.S. citizen on the 21st of June, 1999.
Wow.
So it's been an interesting journey.
What was it like growing up in Iran as a Jew? Because that had to be tough. Jewish people I'm half Jewish. I know Jewish people have it tough everywhere, but I have to imagine in like a country like Iran, it had to be, much worse.
You know what's crazy is when I worked at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter, I would cold call people, and I would say, "My name is Patrick Bet-David." And they would be willing to meet with me because they said, okay, this guy's got an Irish name, Patrick, and he's got a Jewish last name. He's safe. Tell him to come over. But the reality is I'm not Irish. I'm not Jewish. I'm Assyrian and Armenian, and my family's Christian. But it was still, whether you're Christian or Jewish, very, very hard.
I thought you were You're not Jewish?
No, by the way, everybody thinks I'm Jewish. You're not.
Yeah, that's what I heard. That's what I heard. It's online. It says it.
Yeah. So no, I'm not Jewish. I'm Assyrian. I'm Armenian, Christian family.
Wow.
But still, you had to be a little bit under the radar about what your religion was at that time. Like when people were asking you about it, you would say, "Talk to my parents," because you couldn't really be too vocal about it. But again, that's one of the biggest reasons why anytime people start telling me about how America's a bad place to be, I tell them, I said, even the worst day in America is still better than the best day in Iran today.
Really?
So this is a very special place to live here.
Were you, when you grew up, was there a lot of propaganda in Iran? Like for hating America? Did you hate America when you were a young kid?
No, not at all, because of my parents. Because my dad was a pro-Shah guy.
Oh.
And Shah and his community loved America because they wanted to create a partnership with America.
Right.
But those who were anti-Shah and they couldn't stand, the Western side of philosophy, they couldn't stand Iran. I mean, I remember being as young as 5 years old, I'm looking over the window, 10,000 men are marching, flagellating their backs, screaming death upon America. I mean, that's what I grew up around. So
I know it had to be hard. I mean, because it's like propaganda. I mean, you start believing it, I think, after a while, even if you're not a hate person.
Propaganda. It's nonstop propaganda. I mean, when you see this stuff in movies, it's not just a movie. It's purely nonstop propaganda. We had 2 channels, and they convince you nonstop that, they're the best country in the world and U.S. is the evil empire. And a lot of people believed it, believe it or not. I mean, it's a very controlled, nationalized system of media where you can inject whatever thought you want into your people.
When you came to the U.S., how did you get introduced to bodybuilding? Because, I was shocked to find out that you were, such a bodybuilding aficionado. I mean, you really know the sport, the players. You've had a lot of them on your show. You had Dorian Yates. You had Brandon Curry. I know you have Ronnie Coleman is going to be coming up pretty soon. How did you get introduced to that sport?
So I was 14 years old, 6'1", 135, and my name wasn't Tyra Banks. I was, let me put it to you this way. I'd go to YMCA, Dave, and I would wear, I don't know how skinny you were, but I was the skinny bone guy. So I would wear 3 shirts and a sweater, and I still looked awkward when I, to the gym. So this one guy, I got to give him a lot of recognition. His name was Fred. And Fred noticed I was awkward. The awkward kid in the gym. He says, listen, let me just kind of pull you aside. Let's talk. He says, here's what I will tell you. Just focus. Your best friends are these 2.5 pounds weights. I said, what do you mean? He says, these 2.5 pound weights are your best friend. I said, tell me what you mean by this. He says, you're going to start off bench pressing the 45-pound bar, okay? Do that 10 times. And then next week, you're going to add 2.5 pounds. Next week, 2.5 pounds. Right. So imagine I was bench pressing, Dave, with 2.5 pounds.
And you probably had trouble balancing it too, right? Because I remember when you first start, right?
I wish social media was around to record how awkward I looked. But you know what ended up happening with that? It taught me the fact that even the smallest level of progress leads to, because I was a senior in high school, bench pressing 3 plates and 35 on each side. Wow. And I'm curling 75-pound dumbbells as a 17-year-old kid. That's awesome. Then I go into the Army. I'm like, wait a minute, what happened to this guy? And this is pre anything, because I'm talking during my time, it was creatine was a big deal.
Right.
Protein, it was just basic stuff that this is
90s.
94, 95, 96. Sure. I graduated in 96. And then you go into the Army, and I was fascinated by bodybuilding. I was following all the muscle media, the Muscle Mag, the Flex magazine. I was a big Bill Phillips and the EAS and a Muscle Tech.
Yeah.
They were back and forth. And then in the Army, I was the guy that used to buy supplements from, was it called VPS Nutrition or DPS Nutrition? I don't know what the website was.
Yeah, they're still around.
Yes, I used to save like 50% on their products, and all the guys on my unit would come and buy their supplements. I was a creatine dealer.
He's still around. I sell to him, DPS.
Really?
Yeah, they're great.
Yes. I bought their products back in '97. My entire barracks was filled with supplements.
That's
so I got the hook. I got hooked onto bodybuilding, and the rest is history.
What was the year that you met Dorian? Because I know you show that picture a lot. You and Dorian, outside of Gold's Gym Venice.
That's 99. That is the summer of 99 when I met him.
Where were you in terms of like the Army? What part of your career were you at that point?
I had gone out. I had just ETS'd, and I had finished my time. I got out, and my buddy and I were at Venice walking around, and we ran into him. I couldn't believe we ran into him because his stuff was on my wall for 3 years.
Now, obviously, the bodybuilding lifestyle is a very disciplined lifestyle. Obviously, going into the Army is disciplined. So, obviously, you had that kind of like wired into you. I got to be disciplined. I got to take small steps to get to where I want to go. How instrumental do you think like the sport of bodybuilding was to the success that you've achieved today? Because it's mind-boggling.
Dave, I can't even tell you how much I credit bodybuilding and military. Those two things. First of all, my dad was a disciplinarian, period, but I wasn't. Mm-hmm. So I was the 1.8 GPA kid in school, just to kind of put things in perspective. Right. I aced math and calculus. I failed everything else. I wasn't the guy that was literally, that was my MO. So I went into the Army because it was my out. It was an escape.
Sure.
But the thing with bodybuilding is it teaches you patience, because when you go in front of the mirror and you're lifting weights and you go to the gym, you go to the bathroom and you're trying to flex and you're not seeing any major progress, you're kind of like, man, I want that line, but I'm not seeing it.
Right.
I'm not seeing the separation. Maybe this isn't working. And a lot of that has to do with business, because sometimes you could be building your business for 6, 12, 24, 36 months, and you barely see any progress. And it's very discouraging at times, but it's in those moments where you become who you become. So every time I got into that moment, I just would go back and say, don't forget bodybuilding, man. You used to kind of go back to your 2.5 pound principle. I probably told that 2.5 pound story a few thousand times because it applies to business. So a lot of influence into the success of my life.
Do you think it's important to have several different things that you're doing so that when, let's say you want to be a successful business guy, but you have bodybuilding, it's like something to fall back on, something that makes you feel good about yourself? Because I think sometimes people put so much into one thing, and then, like you said, there's always that incubation period before you get to success. It's nice to have something to fall back on and another interest that you have to distract you from maybe those times of stagnation or staticness that occurs in your life.
If it's interest, yes. If it's multiple streams of income, I'm not of that philosophy. And I can explain why. I'm not. Here's why. Let me explain to you why. Mm-hmm. So I get out of the military and I read a book called Multiple Streams of Income. I've read a couple thousand business books, and I pick up this one book called Multiple Streams of Income by Robert G. Allen. And I'm at Bally's. I don't know if you remember Bally Total Fitness.
I worked there, yeah.
At Bally's. So I'm at Bally's and I'm sitting in the corner and I'm reading this book. And it's telling you got to have 10 streams of income because the wealthiest of the wealthiest have so many different streams of income. And I got caught on to that. So I'm going to do a little bit of this. I'm going to sell this. I'm going to sell that. I'm going to sell this. And I'm going to sell this. And then I finally actually got around billionaires and I noticed how they did it. And here's what I noticed from the guys who made the real money. And I'm not talking about 6 figures or 7 figures per year. I'm talking about real money on how they made it. Almost every one of them, Dave, told me the following thing. They said the first big money you make has to be one thing you put everything into. Once you make it big with one thing, then you go to multiple streams of income. So you go this way to go this way. Most people go this way, and then none of them ends up making it. So, all you need sometimes is one big hit. Like even for me right now, when we started this company, I was a stockbroker. So I'm a Series 766, 3126. I can sell stocks, bonds, mutual funds, money. I can sell all of that stuff because I'm licensed for it. Mm-hmm. It was more about a niche. So I chose the niche, insurance, then I eliminated everything. Mm-hmm. And then from there, we became the best at that. And now we're selling 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 policies a month. We used to sell 50, 100. Now we're selling 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 policies a month.
That's crazy.
It's because of the pure focus. So I'm more of the thought of focus first, then go wide.
So, I mean, once you've achieved that, is that why now you're branching out? You're doing the YouTube channel and you're doing some other stuff?
The only reason I'm doing the YouTube channel is the following reason. I think this will be something you'll relate to.
Yeah.
Look, Mr. Olympia in bodybuilding has to go through Dave Palumbo, not the other way around. Let me explain. Let me explain what I mean by this. Whether they like it or not, or whether they like you or not, or whether they like what you say or not, when you got 250,000 subscribers and you got the bodybuilding audience, you're an influencer. They have to go through you. It kind of also means like if somebody wants to be a president, you have to go through an MSNBC debate, a CNN debate, a Fox debate. You just have no choice. You got to go through because there's an audience there, right? The biggest factor with social media for me was I'm a pretty private guy. I've lived a weird life, so I'm not a guy that wants to be too public about my life. But one day I saw a guy who was running for office, Ron Paul. I don't know if you know who Ron Paul is. The libertarian candidate. His son is Rand Paul. Ron Paul, at 69 years old on MySpace, raised $6 million in 24 hours, which became a Guinness Book of World Record. And I said, how the hell is a 69-year-old raising this kind of money? And then who took his playbook was Obama. Obama became a 2-time president. Yeah. And then Trump took that playbook, and you take Twitter out. Trump's not a president, by the way.
No, you're right.
Jack Dorsey, he's not a president. So then it becomes a point where who do you want to be in a marketplace? to control the narrative, you got to have a voice. And that's one of the reasons I started playing the social media game, simply to have a voice where if somebody says something about you, your philosophies, you can always address it because you got a big platform.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a marketing machine, really, too, for whatever what else you're doing. Now, when you had, I saw your interview with Ray Dalio, the billionaire, which I thought was fascinating, and you really were challenging him a lot on some of the stuff he was saying. it was pretty interesting. He's all about diversifying portfolio. I mean, do you agree with that? Because you seem like you were kind of like, challenging him a little bit on that.
I wouldn't disagree with him on diversifying the portfolio of where he's at today, because you have to realize where he is today, but that's not how he got started. Right. There's a big difference. Like, think about it this way, Dave. Imagine if I'm a 16-year-old kid and I come up to you and I say, Dave, what form of GH steroids should I use today? What would you tell me? I mean, honestly, I've never lifted weights. Right. I come up and I say, should I use GH? Should I use Cypionate? Should I use Winstrol? Which one do you recommend? Your answer probably is going to be to me what?
I'm going to say work on your diet and training first. Yeah.
But you see what you're saying? You're giving me more this. Mm-hmm. But now imagine if I'm a guy that's got my pro card, but I'm like Ronnie Coleman was back in the days when he played 16. I'm skinny. I have the right physique, but I kind of want to take it to the next level. My conversation with you is going to be a different kind of a conversation, of course. Right? And then imagine if I'm Brandon Curry, I just won, and I'm having a conversation with you. I've never really made big money. Now I'm asking you, Dave, now that I'm Mr. O, how should I maximize these next 12 months? Because I'm going to be Mr. O for the next 12 months, and I'm the face. What should I do actually make some money off of it? What should I do to take care of my family? That advice may be different, sponsorship, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So, Ray is giving advice to a guy that's worth $19 billion, running one of the biggest hedge funds. So he can say whatever he wants to say, because in his world, he's the best of the best. There is no debate about it. But him coming up was a different philosophy he played when he was first coming up.
Yeah, no, that's an important, I guess, point you're making. Talking about bodybuilders and making money, there's a lot of popular bodybuilders. I never achieved pro status, but I established a certain level of respect in the industry, and I found a niche for myself. If you had to give advice to bodybuilders, you know the industry obviously better than like the average businessman would because you were immersed in it. What would you say is a miss, like something that people are missing, opportunities in terms of being able to earn income for themselves as bodybuilders? Maybe not, because there's not only going to be Mr. Olympia. We know that. So that to say I'm going to be Mr. Olympia and earn a living is ridiculous. Where do you see bodybuilders missing their ability to get that paycheck?
Are you talking about the bodybuilders or the Mr. Olympia brand at the top?
Forget Mr. Olympia. Let's talk about the average, top level amateur and run of the mill pro guy out there. How could they earn a good living for themselves in this sport and in this world, for that matter, without having to work as a fireman on the side?
So it's funny you say that, because I had Steve Kuklo here and his wife 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you.
I love him very well. Yeah.
Yeah, he's 6th place this year. And he came and we had a conversation. The conversation was exactly about what you're asking. Where do you go from here? Because, when you look at the marketplace of bodybuilders, this is my pure, sincere opinion of what I would do if I'm a guy that's wanting to go with bodybuilding.
Right.
I don't see, again, you may disagree with everything I say, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I want to hear.
If you're not able to compete for top 5, don't waste your time. To me, it's very simple.
Really?
And what I mean by don't waste your time is the following thing. Because, okay, so for instance, I don't sell health insurance. I refuse to sell health insurance. Why? Because I'm competing against the government. And if I compete against the government, they dictate the laws. I can't control this. Why would I compete directly here? They don't have, can you imagine if you write a negative review on Yelp for DMV? You think they give a shit? They're like, dude, go stand in line with hundreds, because there's no accountability.
Right.
So today's Mr. Olympia brand doesn't give me confidence on me sacrificing everything to go to the top. Because if a Joe Weider was at the top, if somebody like that's at the top, that I know it's a stepping stone, I'm all in. So for me, for instance, I go back and I think about myself. I'm 6'4.5", 6'5", okay? So if I want to go out there and compete at the highest level, I have to study guys that were my level height-wise. So I'm looking at Dillette, I'm looking at Kovacs, I'm looking at Jean-Pierre Fuchs maybe. I'm looking at guys that were taller and
Ferrigno, right.
Yeah, I have to be 350 pounds off season. My dad's got heart issues. Do I really want to go through that? And I made a logical decision stepping away from it. But today for bodybuilders, if you're going to go up there and be a top 5, then you need to team up with somebody who knows the right supplements, the right medicine, the right things that you need to get to the next level. I mean, one of the things that Ronnie talked a lot about is how big of a role his partner played in getting him the right information, and how big of a role Flex Wheeler played when the two of them had a conversation about what you really got to do to take your game to the next level.
Right.
If you want to go at that level, that's what you got to do. And then if you have a personality, the biggest thing, if you have a personality, you look at the game of basketball or any sport, Alex Rodriguez is going to be okay because he's got a personality.
Sure.
Derek Jeter may not be a TV personality that A-Rod was. So A-Rod may be on Shark Tank. He may do well. A-Rod may get his own reality TV show. He may do well. A-Rod may be good for ESPN because he's got a big personality, right? Mm-hmm. You know, Poppy's got a big personality. You have a personality. If in bodybuilding you have a personality, you could have a career. You definitely could have a career because there's many different routes you can go with what you could do with your personality. And then if you got the body and you have some kind of a acting, or you're also a very good-looking guy, you got the different color eyes, blue color eyes, whatever. You got a way to kind of brand yourself with your physique.
Mike O'Hearn.
Yeah, you can go. Mike O'Hearn, perfect example. You know, you can look at the Hollywood side, you can go in that direction, but it's very, very important to think long-term on the bodybuilding side and not just wing it getting into it. Because I was having this conversation the other day. For me, it's extremely important to create a stream of income with what you're doing today, because you are not going to keep your, like Dexter Jackson is what, 46 and still competing, and it's got a great
50.
physique.
Just turned 50.
50 years old. How many people can do that at 50 years old? And
one person, that's it, him.
It's only one person. That's the point. It's not going to be a lot of people. Look at some of these guys with the kind of pain injuries that they have. So you got to kind of think about long-term, because if you're only relying on that $120,000 check that you're going to get, you're going to be broke very quickly, because once that stops coming in and you don't have another way of making money, especially if you're not a top 5 guy, life is going to be pretty tough. You got to figure out a way to make money. There's only so many supplement companies people can come out with. Not everybody's going to be the next Labrada. Not everybody's going to be the next, these supplement companies that blow up. You really have to have an edge for that. And it's not everyone's game. So I may actually take more the Bill Phillips route than more the Mr. Olympia route, believe it or not.
That's the route I took, pretty much. Only in the internet age. He was in the magazine age, and I always said that's what I want to be. I want to be an information provider, and use that information to eventually create a brand, which I did, and brought it. But how does someone like myself, I do well, obviously, I make good money, and I like what I do, which is important, obviously. How do I take my business and get to that next level, that $100 million level that like you're approaching, or maybe you've already reached?
I think the biggest thing for you is, who do you want to be in the world? How do you want to monetize it in your world? Because one is, if you're a solo person that's based on your personality, you're limited. You just have to understand that part. You have to figure out a way how to bring a pool of guys together who are willing to, like, for instance, if you have a list of 10, 20 guys that like you and trust you and they're influencers in the bodybuilding world, pick the names, whoever these guys are. If you can bring them together to create a bodybuilding university master's class, or to create something like that, where, because the supplement part, a lot of these guys already have their white label contracts with other people, so that may be a tough thing to do. But if you were able to bring that whole thing together and you created a master class, like your own version of Udemy, your own version of something like that, and you sold monthly memberships to it for $99 or $69, and these guys are coming through there, that's a pretty big opportunity. But I would be collaborating with all those relationships.
That's interesting. That's an interesting thing. Now, for the average run-of-the-mill bodybuilder who, we see these guys in the gym, they dedicate every penny they make, every ounce of energy, and they just don't have the genetics to ever make it. What kind of advice do you give those guys when they come to you? Do you say, give it up? How do you tell someone to give up what they love to do?
So, Dave, let me ask you, how am I coming through on the camera? I'm just curious first before I answer the question.
You're perfect.
Okay. Can you ask that question one more time?
Yes. to a person, you see these bodybuilders, these guys, they live, they sleep, they love bodybuilding. They compete. They dedicate every dollar they make. They maybe even sacrifice their relationships. They don't really have like a family. This is all they want to do. But they don't have the genetics to ever go very far in the sport. Probably will never get a pro card. Maybe if they do, they're not going to make money in the sport from competing. They have the side job on the side, maybe training people in the gym, or they work for the town. And these people just love it, and they want to, what do you tell a person like that when he comes to you for advice? Hey, Patrick, how do I make money? What do you say? Quit? I mean, how do you tell someone to stop doing what they love?
It's so powerful with you saying that because, Dave, Joe Rogan once had a interview with his buddy Brandon Schaub. I don't know if you know who Brandon Schaub is. Yep. Brandon Schaub is one of the fighters.
Yep.
And did you ever see the one where on a live episode, he told Brandon Schaub to retire? I don't know if you've seen that one or not.
No, I haven't seen it, but I heard I heard that. Yeah.
So I mean, that's the perfect thing. You need a Joe in your life. You need a Joe in your life to sit you down, and Brandon's fighting it, and he gets.
We lost him. No. Let's see if we can get him back here.
In such and such position, he's a better jiu-jitsu guy than you. You think you can beat him? And he says, I think you'd be surprised. He says, you think you could beat that guy? He says, I think you'd be surprised I could beat him. He says, I disagree. I don't think you can beat him. Now you got to realize this is a friend of his.
Yeah.
He's telling his friend, I don't think you could beat him. So Brandon's like, I can't believe you're saying that. Why would you say that?
Yeah.
He says, look, I just want to be your friend because I don't want to see you go out there and get hit in the face and hurt yourself on long term. I don't have my friend in my life. I think sometimes these guys that are running that can't stand a chance of doing anything with Mr. Olympia need a friend around them to just say, I use your talents in different ways, not in this way. And you got to kind of go a different direction. Unfortunately, a lot of times that conversation is not had, and a lot of times they don't want to hear it.
Our tagline here at RXMuscle is "The truth hurts." So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. Talk to me a little bit about these interviews you've been doing, because I've been watching these mob interviews you've been doing with these wise guys, former hitmen for the mob, made guys. I love the Michael Francesi one. You did the Sammy the Bull Gravano's probably, the blockbuster you did. How'd you get involved with actually interviewing, former mafia guys? It's kind of an interesting niche, you found.
It definitely is. Obviously, I mean, I grew up being a Godfather guy. I grew up being a Carlitos Way. I grew up being all these, movies, and we grew up watching them. But one day, one of my bookers calls me and he says, look, I got a special guest for you that would do good on your channel. I said, who's this guest? He says, he's a former made man. He's a capo. I said, listen, I'm not doing any of the mob stuff. He says, I want you to really consider this. I said, we're a channel for entrepreneurship is what we did. He says, well, it has a lot to do with entrepreneurship. And he starts pitching me on this.
Yeah.
I said, there's no similarities. He said, there's a lot of similarities. So finally, one day, we booked the meeting with me and Michael Francis, who was one of the highest paid mobsters. He was making $6 to $8 million a week in the 80s. He was on the Fortune magazine as the top 50 most powerful mobsters, and he was number 13 at 35 years old. So
selling oil, gasoline, basically.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm in Manhattan Beach, sitting down with Jordan Belfort, Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
And I'm 2.5 hours late to my next meeting because of traffic in LA. You know how it is.
Yeah, it's horrendous. Yeah.
Yeah. So I start heading his way. He decides to keep the meeting. We go to his house. We sit down. We do the interview. And we walk away, and we edit the video, and we put it up with our editing team. And next thing you know, this thing ends up getting 8.5 million views. Then in the Russian translation gets 1.5 million views. And then total ends up being like 15, 20 million views. And then from there, Joe Pistone's people contacted us. And Joe Pistone, the movie Donnie Brasco.
Yes.
And then we did that. And then all these other guys came up afterwards. Frank Collada, Oscar Goodman, who was the attorney of Tony Spilatra, who was in the movie Casino. And then Sammy got out of prison 1.5 years ago.
By the way, the lawyer interview was great. The guy was the mayor of LA. I just listened to that last night. He's great.
I think it's one of the most underrated interviews because he's such an interesting guy with the amount of stories he has.
People probably didn't watch it because it doesn't sound like a glamorous interview. I listened to it last night while I was doing some work, and I was like, this guy is great.
Right? That's exactly, I feel the same way. Yeah.
He wants to legalize drugs, but cut people's fingers off if they do graffiti. It was great.
That's amazing. That's amazing how a person would feel that way. But, so it is what it is. So, and then afterwards we did Sammy. And then at this point, many of these guys ended up having documentaries being picked up, TV shows. A lot of them turned into Broadway shows, books, movies. I don't know how many copies we've sold. But now, every time something happens with the mob, they contact us first. Because
you're like the place to go.
So we went from being the #1 channel for entrepreneurs, now we're the #1 channel for mobsters, which I don't know how those two go together, but it is what it is.
When you interview these guys, I mean, they obviously lived a glamorous life, but most of them were, not most of them, some of them were stone killers, or at least ordered murders. Like, they try to obviously rationalize like they're in the army and stuff like that, and I understand that, but it's like you can see how these guys have a lot of charisma, and you can see how they were successful in what they did,
Yeah, you see that, and you know what I look for, Dave, is because, you see, I go back when I was 16 years old. Okay, I'm 16 years old, and I'm hanging out with a guy. They were 3 brothers, next-door neighbors of mine. They were gangsters, and my dad takes me to Vegas. My parents got a divorce, so I was being rebellious to both of them.
Yeah.
And my dad and I and my uncle Albert go to Vegas, and one night I'm like, I'm going to go hang out with my friends. I'm 15, 16 years old. We go in this car, and we pull up at a red light, and a car pulls up, and all of these guys are hanging out of the window looking at us, and my buddy who's driving at the time takes out a gun and points it at them.
What?
Take out their gun at us. Fight breaks out in the middle of the street. We're running all over the place. Cops are chasing us. And we get away that night. Obviously, we got very lucky. We get away that night. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got shot. I mean, it was all good, but it was a big fight that broke out. I go upstairs. My dad's like, what's going on with you? And I'm breathing really hard. I said, nothing. I was just running upstairs. He says, there's an elevator. You're not running upstairs. He says, what's going on with you? I said, it's one of those things you just don't tell your parents for like 20 years. You're late on them. So that night I come up and I think about my life on who was around me. Dave, I was this close of making a complete different decision and going a complete different route.
Really?
So you and I don't know what it's like to be raised in Staten Island and being around all of these guys and knowing the fact that your parents are trying to hold it together and you're sick and tired of somebody bullying your dad or your mom and that rage comes. So we don't know that part. So my purpose of sitting down with a lot of these guys is, what is the seed that causes a person to flip to go to that level?
Right.
And if there's an opportunity for that switch, well, then maybe somebody could be inspired to want to make that switch. But unfortunately, for a lot of these guys, obviously, it's already they're in too deep for them, especially for a guy like Sammy.
Think about how successful Sammy the Bull could have been in business had he just not gone that lifestyle. He was running all the construction jobs in Manhattan. It was unbelievable. The guy was making a fortune.
He was. Unfortunately, couple incidents is there is a certain infatuation with power. The power that you see when a kid sees power, who's been bullied around or punked, and it's one of the reasons why we lift weights. Think about why you lifted weights. Think about why I lifted weights. Think about why UFC guys start learning how to fight. Somebody punked them. Somebody bullied them.
You're right.
And the route these guys took is just a different route that got them in trouble.
One of the best interviews you did, and I'm just doing this because I want to help promote your channel a little bit. Gianni Russo was the guy who played Carlo in The Godfather, and the interview was so unbelievable. It's so entertaining that I pray that I believe him. I believe that it's legitimate. It's one of the most unbelievable interviews I've ever heard, and the most entertaining. And if you want to know the answer to any question in politics or showbiz that has occurred over the last 50 years, watch the interview, because you'll find out about Marilyn Monroe, how she was killed, how Kennedy was assassinated. This guy was involved with everything. Pablo Escobar. Was that the most entertaining interview you ever did?
I mean, it's an understatement. You're doing an interview, you're trying not to laugh the entire time, but I mean, the stories he told with him being 16 years old, walking upstairs and Marilyn Monroe's in a bathtub, and what happened with him with Pablo when he was having dinner with him, and then some of the I mean, it's so many stories that you sit there and you ask yourself, if this person actually lived this life, this may be the most legendary life a man could have lived that most single men in their early 20s would dream about living.
I mean, it'd make a great movie, even if it's not real. It's a great story. I mean, literally. I mean, he was with John Gotti, right? He was talking about at the Waldorf Astoria, and Frank Sinatra and Don Rickles are in the back room, and Sinatra sends a bottle of Cristal to Gotti, and Gotti gets insulted and has this guy smash the bottle on Sinatra's head, and he just happens to be there to see this,
Well, because here's the thing. He ran the #1 club in Vegas for nearly 10 years.
Yeah.
And anybody and everybody during that era, they all knew his club, and they all knew who he was. It was the club of clubs. It was like Studio 54 of Vegas. I mean, this was a legit club that everybody would go to. But he's got one of the most interesting and craziest stories of all time.
Yeah, I advise everyone to go check out that interview with Gianni Russo on Patrick's channel. The Mobster interviews, in one sense, I was very entertained by them, but in another sense, I started to get fatigued by them, because it's like these guys, they were in jail, some of these guys, for 18 years. They probably have told the stories that they told you 6,000 times, because they have the details down so perfectly. And they all have their own versions, because you have John Alight has one version, Gotti has another version, this one has another version. It's like they're all meshed together, but everyone has their own viewpoint of what really happened on those times of their lives,
It's good to see everyone's point of view. And then, at the end of the day, none of us are going to know the 100% truth. Yeah. Not you, not I, none of us. It's just you're kind of getting a little bit of everything, and you're trying to put some of them together to see if there's validity to some of them. But it's entertaining, and it's interesting if you enjoy that world of mob, Godfather, all of those things. Yeah. There's a lot of interesting stories to it.
All right, I want to just finish up our interview here with I think the most important aspect of what you do, which is help on young entrepreneurs focus themselves, find what their true calling is in life in terms of what they want to do to make themselves excellent, superb, to bring out the best in them. And I was watching some of you just recently, and you said you made an interesting thing. Rather than people like to put quotes up all over the place, whether it be on social media or in their house. You said stop putting quotes up and ask yourself the right questions. Where did you come up with that? Where was that insight from? Because I agree with you on that.
It's funny you say that. Back in 2003, I am $49,000 in debt. Okay, I have my Ford Expedition that I would go to the nightclubs with, filling up the whole truck. It's about to repo. Galpin Ford is coming after me to get the car. And my girl and I that were about to get married, we break up. You know the whole story. I'm in that situation at that time. I kept all my credit report. My credit score was 484, 495, 499. Just a terrible place to be, right? And I get access to these questions, list of questions, and I step away. One of my mentors at that time gave me these list of questions. I step away, and I went to a place, Matador Beach. Is it called Matador Beach? Somewhat like by Zuma in California. Mm-hmm. So I go to Matador Beach, and I spend 6 hours, Dave, going through every one of these questions. And I have my breakthrough. And by the way, some of the questions were about who you get along with, why not? Do you get along better with men or women? Why? How was your relationship with your mom? What events happened in your life that no one knows about that still haunts you? Why are you afraid of commitment? So it's not the questions like, what are your dreams? What is your dream car? Because who gives a shit about your dream car if you have problems on the inside that we got to address before the dream car comes up? So we got to first work on you as the individual. And so I continued that tradition. Last week, we were doing our annual mastermind. We did it at Beverly Hills Hilton. I had 250 of my executives come out. I rented out the BCBG founder's home in Beverly Hills, an $80 million property. And
Unbelievable property, yeah.
Unbelievable property. We're sitting there, and I put 29 questions out to these guys. And we spent 4 hours just going through these 29 questions. And it was more things of realizing, okay, so forget about everybody. In the room, it's just me and you talking, right? Forget about what moves that guy. Forget about the fact that that guy makes $200,000 a month and you only make 40 and competition. Forget about all of this stuff. Let's just talk about you. I said, there's this whole thing about we always need somebody to motivate us and we need somebody to drive us. But who the hell motivates the motivator? You know, who motivates Belichick? Like, who's telling Belichick, you know, you got to go do this? Who motivates Brady? The guy's got 6 of them already. Who motivates Jordan? So I know Phil is in the part, but there's got to be somebody behind it, right?
Yeah.
So I shared with them with the fact that, look, if at the end of the day you get to a point where you know how to drive you're in a very unique group of people that for the rest of your life you're gonna know how to poke at yourself to move you. So I ask questions. How many guys are driven by making money? 10 people raise hands. How many guys are driven by fear of loss? How many guys are driven by this? And then, one that was, how many guys are driven by proving a point to other people? Why you won? 80% of the room went up. So then I asked the question, I said, so how do you get yourself to have the next point to prove to yourself and others? How do you get yourself to do that? Do you have a list of names and faces of people with the quotes that they said about you? Do you have things that you want to do in your life where you're asking yourself the questions like, hey, can you live your life without any of this stuff becoming a reality? Do you have those things in place? Do you think about those things? Because if you can't wake up in the morning and go into that state, your day is just going to be a regular day. But if you can wake up in the morning and go into that state in no time, let me tell you something. You don't need a motivational speaker to wake you up every morning. You don't need a audio or video to fire you up because you know how to poke at yourself. And then once you get to that point, what ends up happening is it's very difficult for other people to get under your skin because no one gets under your own skin more than you do because you know what to tell yourself, because you know all your insecurities, you know all your fears, you know all your bullshit. You know that whole the stuff that we tell ourselves.
Do not to interrupt you, but I used to tell everyone when I would do a competition, when I would look at the pictures afterwards, I would want to throw up. I was so disgusted by what I saw, even if I won the show. All I saw was all the flaws in my physique, and that was my motivation to be a better bodybuilder.
Yeah, that's a perfect example right there. So now how do you go with that continuously? Because sometimes, Dave, as we age and we start making money, you will always know if somebody's in it for the money or if somebody's in it for a vision bigger than money. Because if we slow down, like I'm 41, okay? People will ask a question. So we're building this company. I'm the majority owner. We have buyers interested. De La Hoya is one of our investors. Gabriel Brenner is one of our investors. We have $2 billion Atalaya fund from New York. That's one of our investors. Right. And I'm building this business. Money's coming at this point from all over the place. Opportunities are coming along. It's very easy to kind of sit there and say, well, look at you. Look who you've become. And look at the throne you're sitting on. And that's one of the most dangerous places to go because the moment you go there, you get knocked out.
Yeah.
The moment you get there, you're going to get knocked out. So it can't just be about the money. If it's about the money, I guarantee you the person's going to slow down. If it's about a cause, it's about a vision, it's about correcting an injustice, it's about a legacy, that lifespan of needing more endurance and stamina and focus until you get there will cause you to last longer versus the other guy stops once he starts making money and he's not in your league. This is why the game of big thinkers, we don't find out who the biggest thinkers are for a good 20, 30, 40 years. Yeah. It's a long time until you realize who the biggest thinkers are. But, all of these are different for different levels of people.
Just to give you an example, you remember the big companies, like you said, EAS. Bill Phillips sold EAS for like $300 million or something like that back in the 90s, and then we never saw him again. Do you think that was like he reached the pinnacle and he just couldn't go beyond that?
And you know what's crazy that you say that? I'm a Bill Phillips fan.
Me too.
I'm a fan of what he did, and I felt a guy like that. By the way, think about it this way. Imagine if a guy like that sincerely wanted to buy the Mr. Olympia brand and he wanted to take it to a different level. He's a diehard bodybuilding guy.
That's what he should have done. You're right.
With you. A guy like that should come out and just put out the retirement and say, hey, here's an offer, guys. Let me just buy this thing out, or let me buy 51% of it and let me run it kind of like Dana White runs UFC.
Hey, I think you should do it, Patrick. Come on, I'll help you out. I'll be your partner. Buy the Olympia brand. Come on. There you go. You are a bodybuilder at heart. You can bring it back to your roots now.
I got to tell you, man, I love the game like I can't even describe it to you. To me, it's a emotional game because I I see these guys and I admire their level of discipline, and I know the criticism from the other side when people make it. I also have the argument for that, but I don't think for whatever reason, the Mr. Olympia brand doesn't know how to give the argument to some of the people on the other side. I said this the other day. I said it to a video I made about what Joe Rogan did, that they got to take this out of the playbook about how he made marijuana be legal. Look, I don't know if you're a tattoo guy. I don't have any tattoos. You don't look like you have any tattoos. Maybe you got a couple on your back.
Yeah.
I can't see it from here, but you remember in the 80s and the 90s, if you saw somebody with a tattoo, what did you and I think of him? We thought the guy's part of a, Mongols, or he's a gangster, or, but today you see tattoo, it's art. Today you got people that are getting it as an art. 30 years ago, if somebody smoked weed, you call them a pothead. The guy's not going anywhere. Today, people are looking at it as medicinal purposes and different things.
Right.
I just don't think the right narrative is being told with the Mr. Olympia side. I think a Bill Phillips guy could do an incredible job. I think some of those guys need to come out. But again, it goes back to your point. But if his vision was just money, the world found out it's just about money. I mean, that's just Joe Weider wasn't about money.
No way. He
worked
worked till 10 o'clock at night when he was worth billions.
Have you seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari? Have you seen the movie Ford versus Ferrari?
Not yet. No, I haven't seen it. Good.
You got to go see it. You got to go see it. Because when you see the movie, you're going to look at Enzo Ferrari and you're going to think about Weider. It's the first thing you're going to think about.
Really? Okay.
You're going to say that's why there's a scene where Lee Iacocca tells Henry Ford II where they're talking shit about Ferrari, and it says, listen, you guys can say whatever you want to say, but that man is going to go down as the greatest automaker in the history of mankind for what he did with Ferrari, and he pissed off the Henry Ford II guy.
Yeah.
So that person in bodybuilding needs to come out, and if he comes out, he can do some damage today with social media. Imagine Joe Weider with social media. Yeah. Imagine a 60-year-old Joe Weider with social media. The bodybuilding world would be a whole different level.
You're right. Well, Patrick, I want to thank you so much. I know you have a very busy schedule, probably way busier than my schedule, and you took the time to sit down with us, and it meant a lot to me, and I know our audience is going to love it. I feel very hyped up and motivated. I can't wait to go work after I get off the line with you. I
got to tell you, man, I have so many people at the home office that are Team Palumbo. You just saw one of my guys. Obviously, they didn't see it, but he had to come and say hello to you. They buy your stuff. They buy your oil. Awesome. Whatever you do, they swear by it. So I know sometime when you're making videos and you're just you and the camera, just so that the world is loving the content you're creating, man. You're making a difference. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. And best of luck. And hopefully one day you'll be, maybe you'll own the Olympia, or maybe I'll own the Olympia brand one day. You never know. I can't wait for that day. All right, guys, that's going to take us to the end of another episode of Live With, brought to you by Species Nutrition. I'm Dave Palumbo. We'll see you next time.